Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Convery, the podcast that's your launchpad for career inspiration. I'm your host, Brian Convery, and around here, we build success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, it's also about building your own jungle gym. Each episode, we share real stories from all kinds of careers and all levels to help you design a career portfolio of sorts that fits you and fits your passions. Let's dive into today's conversations. Today's guest doesn't just work inside systems, he questions them, rewrites them, and asks who they were actually built for in the first place. Colin Belcourt is an author, certified sustainability practitioner, an award winning DEI and belonging leader, business intelligence professional, and a queer systems thinker who works asks a deceptively simple question. Colin's career didn't start with a title or a straight line. It started at the front desk and moved through administration, HR, recruitment, project management, DEI leadership, international talents, and so much more. His journey is proof that your first job doesn't define you, but how you learn, adapt, and stay true to yourself absolutely does. Colin, welcome to the Coffee with Convery podcast.
I want to cut just a clip of that and just play it as my alarm clock every morning because your description, I'm like, am I kind of accomplished? Like, did I make it?
I think so. I think so.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. So we'll start with some rapid fire questions, and then we're going to jump right into all the things that we just kind of talked about up front.
Okay.
What's your superpower?
Oh my God, what's my superpower? What would I like my superpower to be? AKA Mystique from X-Men because she had it made. My actual superpower, though, I'm like, oh my God, now I gotta rack my brain about this. Probably talking to people, like finding connections where they may not be so obvious.
A connector. Your superpower is connecting. Connector. Yeah, awesome.
Exactly.
I love that. What was your favorite subject in school?
Not gym class. 100% not gym class.
Me.
Well, probably art. Probably everyone who knows me would be like art, 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 art all day, every day.
Like, and do you like to paint or draw? Is that something you do too?
Okay, so I did. And then, of course, for some strange reason hit puberty and just decided like boys and like socializing was so much more important than that. So I kind of stopped and I never ended up
Okay.
going back to it. So I'm thinking maybe writing was my like soft re-entry into the creative
There you
world again.
go. In the creative arts. Yeah, absolutely. We all start somewhere. What was your very first job?
Drive-through cashier at Harvey's restaurant, which by the way is still the best burgers.
Yes. And where was this restaurant? Was it where you live now, or was it?
No, so it was in Newmarket, Ontario, and it was
Okay.
literally one of like I don't want to say, what's that word when people are like, not like a pillar or like the one of the
No,
first ones,
no, but yeah,
but
yeah.
it was like one of the old ones.
Like
So
an
there were so
original.
many people. Yeah, the original. So like when people would come and visit me, they'd be like, "What year are we in?" Like I'm very confused. So
Yeah.
it was one of the first.
Interesting, interesting. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Cannot be done. But I do have 40,000 words in a book coming
There
up.
you go.
So you can pick any one of those, but there's
Okay,
no way I can pick one. There's never a world.
that's okay. No problem. We multidimensional.
Okay, yes, we'll go with that. Multidimensional.
Okay, I'll help you out there. All right, let's take us back where high school and those early jobs at the front desk and beyond. What were you learning about work, about people, and about yourself at that stage? And even before you had the language for the ideas of careers, identity, or success. So what were you learning at that point about people and about yourself?
Gosh. I, well, I feel like it's like, what was I learning slash what was I actually learning? And I think I was basically trying to be as invisible as possible, but in the most aesthetically pleasing way. Because way back in those early days, and I say way back, I know I'm not that old. I'm 37, but like in gay world, that's like how many deaths have I experienced to date? But I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really learning how to read a room.
Yeah.
And I did have to learn how to read a room fast. Like it was figuring out a version of you that people need in that moment. Do you need to be polite, or do you need to be chill, or do you need to smile and not ask questions? It was really that, not to like reference that superpower mystique, which kind of makes sense now, but
Yeah.
it was doing what you're doing in shapeshifting before you even know it. So like it's not a surprise that that came up in rapid hour to me, really.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think a lot of queer people go through that kind of.
yeah, without even realizing it too. Like they
Yeah.
think, and I think too, they think, oh, this is normal. Everyone goes through it, to which they do an extent. But I think queer people specifically go through it at a multi-level um, experience, because there is so many different ways that they're seen and they see themselves in the world. So yeah, if I was to think about my retail time, which is at the very beginning of all that experience, it was probably learning how to be helpful, non-threatening, like that type of person that you walk into a store and they're forgettable in just the right way, because they're pleasant, but they don't leave that lasting impression. And I thought, you know what, this will bring me success, because it felt like the safest way to navigate the world, with like no friction, no surprises. Let me just come in, dial in, and sneak out.
Yeah.
And thinking back now, I kind of think about how ironic that is for someone that didn't want to be seen, and it was already practicing this level of performance, of learning how to anticipate and shift and avoid conflict and smooth over that discomfort. And I think I was really learning that that skill of shapeshifting could really get you through a lot more than just customer service, because especially later on, like you said in my intro, it really did help me change roles, or at
Yeah.
the very least be open to new opportunities.
Absolutely. Because I'd like to jump into that non-linear career path now, because a lot of the listeners here, as I've shared with you, are, high school, post-secondary, first job, or people reinventing themselves for the next chapter. And so many young people tell me, I haven't had a job in my career path yet. And I'm like, I don't think I have either. I don't even know what a career path is. I've jumped all over the place. And you have too. And I think there's a story to be told there. How, being, in all these various roles, how have these helped you shape the professional and system thinker you are today?
Yeah, I think when we were looking, which aside, I think when we were looking at that question, I was like, wow, my career path really has not been linear. And it felt like one of
Yeah,
those screw pie
bakery,
boards.
documental
Yeah,
specialist, HR coordinator, project manager. But
I
these
know
again are come with all transferable skills, which again can be young people are trying to understand, like define that for me. And but
that
you,
part.
yeah, hmm
So, well, it feels like it's this murder board of like red string of how does this connect to this and how does this go with this.
I
I
love
think
that.
that the more people take a step back and actually look at their board, so to speak, you'd see how the earlier roles really did bring you to it. Like if I look at, again, my retail time or front desk, there is no other time in my career that I learned more about, say, power or leadership than any other thing, because you learn so fast who thinks you are legitimately just furniture, just there to sit and make eye contact with, and who actually comes to you or allows you to be present. And then if you think, okay, well, that's retail, but how does a bakery manager help you out? People will say, "Oh, that's not transferable to this. Like you ran a bakery. What really does that do?" And I'm like, "No, it's just supply chain logistics with a little bit of vanilla icing on top." Like you have these transferable skills that
100%.
you do have to peek at.
Right. No, exactly. I thank you for highlighting that because I think so many people often are also, I don't want to say afraid, but often don't know how to highlight those skills like you just did because
Yeah.
people are going to try to overlook it. And no,
Yeah.
focus. Bakery manager, by the way, probably up pretty early. dedicated.
Oh my God. The amount of times that I was up at like 3 a.m.,
See?
4
See?
a.m.
Exactly. All right,
But
so
it's funny.
I want to jump now into writing voice and your
Oh,
book.
wait.
Oh, okay,
Wait.
sorry. Go, go, go.
I did want to say, so it's funny because when you said the overlooked there, I was like, it popped into my head. I was just like,
Hmm.
because the overlooked ones, it's crazy how those overlooked ones really are the system, if you think about it. Because, like, if you look at those, and I'm like, this is not my thoughts, I'm just going to quote it with various comments I've heard over the years, especially when I was in those roles. It's like, oh, you're a receptionist. Yeah, but the receptionists know where all the bodies are buried. Like, they know who's coming, they know who's going, they know what time it is. If you look at like HR coordinators, sure, they're going to be the bottom of the totem pole. They know who's crying in the stairwell. They feel those winds of change are coming. Like,
Yeah.
all these overlooked roles are kind of that backstage pass if you're paying attention. And I was like, ooh, okay. And then, like, as you progress and you get into by oh, okay, that sounded weird. I was going to say later years, but then I was like, here we are again, 37,
How
with
about you?
project management or DEI, those job titles that you see before that you were like, ooh, that looks so fancy, which don't even get me started because as someone in recruitment or who used to be in recruitment, the job titles these days are absurd to the point of you're like, what is transferable about that job versus a general like reception job? But I
Yeah.
think you become so being in those like again low level jobs or being in these positions that often get overlooked, you're already fluent in this weird unofficial
Yep.
language of how your power is going to be showing up in the room. And I think that at the end of the day, it ends up being not just shaping how you think about those systems, but how you actually move through them. And then again, like not to be so morbid about the murder board, but you all of a sudden see this huge culprit circled
Hmm.
in the corner of who is actually benefiting from the system that you're
Yeah.
in. Because you can have a system, but like it's probably not going to serve those who are actually in it.
I love
Anyways,
that.
that's
I love that you went deeper on that. That makes so much sense. And also, don't underestimate yourself as that recruitment coordinator, whatever the case may be. And I often know as a leader myself, and I see you are so much of this as well, is those are also the people that you bring along for the ride,
oh yeah.
right?
They're always the ones that get partnered up with people because like and people will look down on support roles a lot of the time and I'm like, you know what you need and you know what you love in the end is a good support person. And if you can provide that support to someone and they in turn provide it back, it's again, you're learning way more than any fancy director of DJing at this company. Like it doesn't, no, keep your
Yeah,
title.
exactly. All right, let's jump in into the writing and your book because this is a big highlight of this podcast, of course. As a queer leader, much of your work explores belonging, self-erasure, and systems that weren't designed with everyone in mind. Sorry. Your book, The Blue Hour Gospel, identifies and explores identity, belonging, and the lived experience. At a really basic level, what made you feel like this book was necessary now? And especially for people who feel like they're doing fine and that winning.
I've got a bazillion thoughts on this. So I'm
Let's go.
sorry, it's not going to be basic. I know everyone out there is probably like listening who knows me is like, Colin, basic. I feel like this is not going to
Maybe I should have left out the
go.
word basic. Let's tell it all.
They're probably like, Brian doesn't know what he's in for at this point because Jesus take the wheel.
Yeah,
But no, okay, so anything book related, I'm like, because I'm so excited, but at the same time,
you
I'm also
should
like,
be.
oh, this is terrifying. But I feel like it came about and I sat down to write it, A, because of a lot of good therapy, but also because this day, watching so many people, especially marginalized, like anyone from any marginalized community, people that I would say corporations, like the big ones especially, do a really good job of letting you in, but never being fully invited in, are really disappearing into their roles. And if I'm honest, I think even into their lives that they ended up fighting really hard to access a lot of the time. Like people with good jobs and curated homes and the right degrees all showing up. Underneath, there's this, and I know it's there for everyone these days because who in the year 2026 is not? But there's this low level hum of just exhaustion that comes from having to contort yourself and translate and soften and perform. And it was the thought that it's like, this is what gets missed when we talk about inclusion, like it's a checkbox. And what really leads us to being in these places, because it really does start long before we show up for the first day on the job, is like who we are and how we've been taught to, I guess, experience the world. Like we're living in a time that I would say is very much when visibility has increased. Yes, how could it not with all these lovely new electronics that we have? But being vulnerable in those places hasn't been made safer. Like we see countless DEI statements where people say, "Oh, you can be yourself here. They really support you." But what they often mean is you could be yourself in a way that just does not disrupt the status quo. And there's such a difference in those two things because it's like, don't be too loud about your grief, or don't be too specific about your queerness and what binary you fit into, or too honest about what it costs to you to actually belong in these places that never really had you in mind when they were designed. And that is on top of all the intercommunity dynamics where we're only included in the damn community we represent if we fit the palatable version of said community. So I think there's like
Mm,
this weird layering going on there where to a certain extent the book was a response to it, and it was this lie that's out there that if you're doing fine, it's the same thing as being whole and being who you are supposed to be. And that there's this grand myth that survival, if you've survived, woo, it's enough, you've got it. Because in
mm.
queer theory, a lot of the time when you're reading, and I'm sorry that I'm going so long winded
No,
here,
no, no, this is
um,
great.
but there's so much talk about liminality and being between states. So, like being between binaries. And I think if I think of the book as the Blue Hour Gospel, I think a lot of us are living in that blue hour or the in between of things in our lives. So, like, not quite crisis, not peace. And I wanted to name that space and ultimately say to people, like, you're not broken or alone because what you're carrying around, it's real and it matters. And 95% of the other people who you talk to in the day are carrying it too.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, thank you for that. And I want to
you're
keep
like,
going deeper on this. No, I want to keep going deeper. This is important because um, there's a lot of this going around, and especially in the marginalized communities, and especially for queer people, as you mentioned. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, as that's the focus too here in this conversation in the book is, a lot of times people will ask you, well, how are you doing? And oh, I'm doing well. Um, how does being doing well hide deeper damage, especially for queer people who maybe are not doing well?
I think we are, and we've been in there for a few years now, but I think we're in this weird cultural moment where being booked and busy has really become the proxy for being okay or doing well. And
Interesting.
I would think that, especially for queer people and really anyone in general that's been othered by the design of all the systems out there, success really does get framed as the proof that you've made it in the world. And it's like, look, you're in the room, you're on the panel, you're thriving. And it becomes this weird commentary moment of Amy Poehler jumping out of Mean Girls and being like, yay, sweetie, you did it. Like, you're doing amazing. And if you stop and actually look at it, what we're calling doing well is actually just high functioning harm because in a lot of the cases, it really is just self Self-Erasure dressed up as professionalism to make it through the day.
Wow. Wow. High functioning harm.
Mm. And I think we've seen it play out like so many times, and we're
Yeah.
seeing it play out across the world in this very moment. Like, if you look at the wave of anti trans legislation, book bans, or even going back a few, or I think it's a few years now. I'm honestly, time kind of just melds itself in my mind, but Roe v. Wade. And even as some queer folks or other marginalized folks gain visibility in the mainstream, um, or leadership roles, or this doing well again, there's this very real legislative effort to erase like rights, histories, and at this rate, probably futures if we keep it up. So when we say we're doing well, it's basically like, let's call a spade a spade. It's you can be applauded on LinkedIn or promoted. You can still be unsafe though in your doctor's office. Like, you can be married, you can have your kid taken from you in a custody battle because your family's not legitimate in the eyes of the world. Like, you can be doing well and doing all these things. And then on top of that, you have all the serious things in the back of your mind being like, oh my God, I'm again multi-layered in the world. It's this harm of we've got to keep up with this, but also at the same time, look what we're dealing with all the way
Yeah.
back here.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite people that I read about a lot, Jose Esteban Munoz. He wrote about queerness in particular as something that we're always like reaching for. So again, kind of a horizon, not there yet, which I'm like, ooh, okay, that in between moment. And I think his writings are especially true right now in professional spaces where we're told, bring your full self to work, bring those authentic selves, and but don't get uncomfortable, don't make people uncomfortable, don't give them any way. Like, you can bring your authentic self if it makes the dominant majority have another way that to show that, like, oh look, they are a part of the majority, look at them go, they have this pronoun, they have this train of thought. And it does give a contradiction at the end of the day to us, that of this psychic splitting where you become really fluent again in smiling while disassociating, and it's not belonging, it's just performance at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah. Yeah. So true. I want to talk a little bit more about this. You write about learning to disappear in order to be loved. Can you talk more about that?
mhm. I think this one, okay, buckle up, get ready for this roller
Okay.
coaster.
Here
I'm
we
like,
go.
this one's gonna be another like long-winded one.
No, no, no. It's all good.
Because I think what a lot of people don't realize outside of even the queer community is that there's a layer that comes before we even walk into these workplaces. So if we're talking about learning to disappear, like to be loved, on top of that, when it gets transferred over to the workplace, it's you see a really different picture, I would say. So if I was to look, and there's prime examples at the moment, but in queer spaces particularly, we say, well, we're pretty like we, especially in North America, probably Canada more often than not, people will say we're pretty free because, like, look, we're on primetime television, we have pop culture moments, we have representation, we're being empowered and living our truth, and it's kind of a bitter laughter at some point to think about that, because the truth is, if you want to call it out, is that it's we're still destroying ourselves for the proximity to desirability. So you don't have abs, you're not worthy. Like, you don't party, post thirst traps, flirt the right way, forgettable. Or even you communicate too much, you ask for care, you're expressing your needs and your longing. Oh, like, you're so needy, why are you so desperate? And you look at all the apps out there, so people will say, oh, it's just my taste, it's get branded as this is my taste preference, as if it's personal standards, but really all it's doing is disciplining each other into disappearance. So anyone who's like soft or complicated or carrying grief, someone who doesn't get photographed the right way, hell, most of the time, they're the ones that also get erased before they even have to do it themselves. And I know I'm gonna try to ease back into the question now because that was a
No, no,
tangent. But
all good.
like, plot twist, we now, like, knowing that, walk into a workplace and realize those exact same metrics we were just holding to ourselves in that personal space are now also applying to us in a different way in the professional space. So it's like double homicide. There's two ways that they're going to get you here. And those metrics come with even worse lighting in a way, because if you go into one of those hetero bathrooms in the building, the lighting is horrible. You go in there and it's gray hair. But it is back to, oh, you don't take up space? Amazing. Like, you're low maintenance in the workplace and you don't ask for what you need, like, on top of things. You are so professional. And you're showing up polished and looking like beautiful and stuff. Ooh, like you've got leadership material written all over you. And truly, the less you ask for, the more margin that company, that person, that whoever it is gains, because it's easier to manage someone who's managing themselves versus not. So it definitely comes
Interesting.
with a catch, because in the queer community, it's very like, I would say too, that the, no, probably not. But I would say that at the very least, a lot of the violence and harm will come from people who know what it's like to be that belonging. Like I said before, we're carrying it around. Like, I think away, you think away. Everyone else probably does think deep down, oh, I want this, this, and this. Um, but we're not allowing each other that space. But the problem is, in the workplace, that erasure is handed down by people who have no idea what it already costs us to shrink back and forth, because we're told, like, oh, you're thriving. And what that means to me, at least when I've heard it at the past few places I've worked at, is like, oh, congratulations, you disappeared. You disappeared real well into our culture. And when we're praised for being resilient, which is a word I've learned to kind of cringe at over the years too, is them saying, great, like, you've learned how to survive without being a burden. And we love that for us because we haven't had to change, because you've just kept pushing it all the way down. And it's not softness that gets punished in all of it, it's the honesty. And
Yeah.
I think if our worth is still, if our self-worth, that is being measured by how little space we take up,
Yep.
then no one's thriving. Everyone's just well behaved.
Exactly. And you talked about that a little bit there about, creatives and leaders are often praised for being emotionally intelligent and resilient. Um, but I wanted to ask you, like, and you somewhat led into it, but where does that turn into emotional self-neglect,
I
right?
think emotional intelligence really turns into that emotional self neglect the second it stops being about your connection and it starts being about containment. So, like,
Um,
if you're always the one in a situation that is de escalating, absorbing, staying calm, people really, if you think about it, are going to stop asking if you're okay. And they're just going to assume you were built for this. You've got what it takes to get through it. And our good buzzword friend resilience, that I'm like, you can already see my little tick happening there. It's not anything special. It's just a pretty word replacement for perfect. Again, we don't have to change because we can rely on you to smooth that over. And sure, praise feels good, but we should realize that at the end of the day, the praise, the clapping, it's coming for silence. And the longer you wear that silence
mm,
and strength, the harder, I think at least, it gets for you to admit that you were tired in the first place.
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of talk right now about confidence and personal branding, and we're in the world of personal branding. And as you talked about the devices, how does image being polished, desirable, impressive become a kind of trap in queer lives?
So I think back to, and I would again say that we are, especially, and I know each group has their minutia of how it really affects them differently. But again, with gay men in particular, or queer people, there's this multi-layered trap, you could say, or labels that are put on us. And I think speaking specifically about like my experience and how I've seen the world is there was this weird invisible boundary. I don't know if anyone else remembers it, but like maybe a year, 2 years ago, Instagram and Twitter were very like, well, this is where you come to thirst. This is where you're coming to do this. And LinkedIn was where you pretended that you were above all of it. But now it's like, no, no, not at all. If you go to a queer professionals group on LinkedIn, where you're supposed to go to help support each other and break those barriers and like really get to the meat of how we can help each other, there's now pictures of shirtless gym selfies with captions like,
Yeah.
this is what it means to be authentically you, and confidence breeds success. And suddenly it's like, wait, shredded abs are a professional asset? Like, if you don't have these bodies, then you're not authentic or confident and you're not going to get ahead. Because I'm like, wait a second, how did this trap all of a sudden become twofold? Like, you have to worry about being professional, and now you have to worry about being hot, apparently. And if I look at a lot of the people doing said posts, or if you question said posts, a very common rebuttal will be, "Well, this is self love, right?" And it's like, well, okay, it is, and I in a way, and I'm just as guilty. I did it for quite a long time as well, but it's just beauty politics. Like if you're not polished and perfect, professional, and again now hot with a cause, your thoughts aren't getting traction. So your posts don't get like. We continue this downward spiral of, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And this weird world of queer life and professional life have now morphed together. And we've learned to just flatten attention into attraction. It's like,
Right.
even in these queer
Right.
spaces that we've built, it's the body deciding whose voice gets carried the furthest. And like, it's not even just social media. I know when you and I met the first time, I mean, your viewers are probably going to come for me in the comments. So, sorry. But I made a little snide remark about a certain hockey TV show that has some rivalries in it. But like, if you look at the books that get buzz nowadays, or the shows that get renewed, and like anything that is gaining traction, it's plot lines that are just two shirtless guys playing cat and mouse who happen to be going through such deep times, but are also so aesthetically pleasing. And oh, it's so hard to be them. And it's like we're recycling this trap. We're
Yeah.
recycling the same things in different aspects of our lives at this point. We're building a brand, but it's just a cage. And the more beautiful the cage, the harder it is to admit it's a trap. So it's like we're tired, we're trapped, we're
Yep.
just circling the globe.
No, so true, and so many great takeaways and points there to think about for all of us, and especially those in the queer community when you're trying to support each other
Mhm.
as well, or you should be supporting each other,
I was gonna
um,
say, or hopeful.
or hopeful. You make the point that harm doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like compliance. How can that talk about that a bit and how that plays out over the years?
So I know the common thought is like harm is loud, right? But I don't think harm always arrives with a loud slap. Sometimes it shows up with, say, a smile and a whispered suggestion of like, just make this easier on yourself to get through it, versus something loud. So if I think back to time as a teenager, it starts with small edits like changing how I walk or lowering my voice or laughing at jokes in a school setting, even if they're at my expense. Or when I've moved to my first job,
Yep.
it becomes more of a don't correct the manager because you're the bottom of the hierarchy. You don't want to be difficult. You don't want to do this. So you think, okay, I'll make it easier on myself and be quiet. Then you get to early love, and it's be what they want you to be. Shrink the edges. Don't ask for too much. Let them name the rules. whatever you do at the end of the day, call it chemistry because you're like, oh, okay, it's much easier than to challenge it. And then even in later time with families, it's you get very good at switching. So like say pronouns for the holiday dinner, instead of saying he, you say they, or instead of in business, you're which I love this when businesses are like, we're all family here. It's like exactly. So you don't go into the office and say, I was sitting with my husband and he, you're like, I was sitting with my partner and they, because you get good at the switching. And it keeps going down the line to where you're now mid-career and your compliance with it all looks like the praise we talked about earlier in the last question. It's like, again, you're polished, you're a team player, you're just so calm all the time, which no one has ever said to me, by the way. If there's one thing I will not get, it's calm. Surprise, surprise. And again, you smile because you aren't on that proverbial chopping block of being different or being stood out. And I think even more so with a lot of the conversations I've been trying to have recently with people, because I feel like I joke about like deaths in the queer community, but like once you reach past a certain age, it's almost like you stop hearing about later life experience. And I think that is into this whole thing in its own way, because eventually, after all those other instances that I just talked about, you get to this point where you've aged out of the room and built your whole self around. And suddenly now you're in the later half of your life with nothing, like you're not chasing all these same things. So you've got the same mentality though, from what you've just built and put yourself through. Like you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not hot enough to be fascinating. I'm not young enough to be marketable to people. I'm not loud enough to be heard. And again, that people get really good at making themselves forget those needs to stay whole. So I really do think harm isn't that loud coming with a bang. It's that slow breakdown of erosion over time to where you forget where you fit.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. No, no, totally makes sense. A lot of people are taught to turn pain into output, better work, better art, better performance at work. At what point does that stop becoming or being healing and start being extraction?
I think, especially when we say extraction, we mean something that's taken from you. So, like
Yeah.
energy, story, labor, anything without care for your restoration. And personally, I would die on the hill that it becomes extraction the moment your pain starts serving everyone but yourself. Because like with back to that booked and blessed earlier on, it's like we're taught, and I think in different ways, to make trauma productive in a way. Like you're turning your heartbreak when you break up with someone and you're a young professional, it's like, ooh, let me just put myself into the work and make a deck, or let me channel my grief into more compelling art at the time. And if you throw your healing into it, and then every wellness guru out there in the whole entire world is preaching for you to reshape your pain into this bright, new, healed you super being. It's addictive in a way. Like at first, it feels like power because hell, even writing this book, I was like, like think about all these painful memories and look what
Yeah.
this is going to do. But then the further I got, I was like, well, it's basically just pain getting repackaged and handed out. It's not healing. It turns into this pipeline for algorithm lovers of social wound observing. So I think really if the value your story has is what it produces for others, it's capitalism. Like it can be healthy, sure. We can look at it from so many ways to use your grief and trauma to guide your work. But I would say my key point here is that consumption of your story isn't going to heal your grief, but your honesty with yourself and your perspective, that'll be the linchpin into how you start to navigate things differently.
Absolutely. Really key points there. What does it cost someone to be constantly safe, in your opinion, versus being honest?
I would say the short and sweet everything. It sounds dramatic, I know, but it does. It costs everything, and you don't realize it at the time because small little things here and there to be safe really add up over time. Like it's costing you your intimacy, your clarity, your own reflection, like we talked about. And one personal share here is I remember many moons ago when I started therapy with this really good therapist at the time, and we were talking through things, and he asked me, "What do you like doing in your spare time? Like, who are you?" And I sat there for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and I was like, I have zero idea who I am or what I like because I've spent so long saying, screw what you like or like who you are. What does the world want you to be so that you can be safe in it? And I ended up leaving that session with this just like profound loneliness and heartbreak in a way because I felt like in a way that was actually worse than any breakup or parting of ways that I've been through because it was myself that was missing and it came from being safe. And it wasn't until I ended up speaking with my partner later on when he was like, Colin, but look, like you may feel like that, but look at the small things in there. Like you like doing art, maybe like you like doing video games, you like doing this. And it kind of stopped me and I thought, okay, you're right, there are little bits hiding in there, so sometimes it does take that space to turn around and say, oh no, these like are all small things, sure, but not what everyone else wanted you to like. And in a way, if I
Mm,
think back, it sounds so corny because it's like, no, don't. But in a way, he did save me from returning and retreating to that safe spot of just being like, oh, these are easy, like high level things. Let's go back to that and turn off our minds and get back into it because it gave me the freedom to start thinking, okay, I can be whoever I want to be at that time. But yeah, the longer you perform safety and the harder it gets to remember what your real voice sounds like,
yeah.
or if anyone would even love you if you used it. And I think that is an absolutely terrifying place for anyone to find themselves.
Wow. Such powerful words you just spoke. It makes me think too about when you're asked those questions, being part of the gay community, queer community. I think I've done in those positions where they even at work there were those questions and like get to know each other. And I think when I was in those situations, now that you've said it the way you've articulated it, I threw in words like bike riding, book reading, and I'm like, these aren't things I really even like.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end, you're like, who's that guy?
Right. And I'm glad in this explanation of or this example with the therapist, you didn't sometimes you fill the space with the void and don't allow ourselves to think it. And I found myself doing that, and then it's interesting how that played out. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a life lesson there.
Thank
Um,
you.
if external oppression is only part of the story, what's the most dangerous lie queer people end up believing about themselves?
I think this one is so tricky because I'm like, it can be so subjective. So people can have such a vastly different thing. But I think the most dangerous would be, um, and that it's not even just myself, but what I've learned through other people is that we start to think any harm that comes to us was earned in some way. Like if we were a little less feminine or if we were more masculine or more attractive, easier to love, we wouldn't keep getting left behind. And it's not that lie, so to speak, that we are telling ourselves, oh, we're not enough of that. It's that the world is cruel enough for obviously thinking that, but we tell ourselves that we deserved its cruelty because we weren't enough. And that is something that I think is hard to break, hard to even think
Yeah,
about because we're so focused on how can I get to that next? How can I be themselves? How can I even start to like fix the magic word fix myself? And it's like you gotta we don't realize how much we actually like partition ourselves off, I think.
Yeah, and for someone listening who's feeling that they have to fix themselves and missing something, feeling lost, what's the first step they should take?
I think, well, it sounds easy. Well, actually, no. Okay, maybe I could say that. And then you're like, that doesn't sound easy at all. But I think in theory, starting by noticing what you're actually calling normal in your day to day life, like, is there a numbness or this constant feeling of you're not delivering to the extent that you should be delivering your performance?
Hmm.
The way you shrink before you're speaking, the way you think it's your fault, but it's also not your fate. Like the first step, I think to me, isn't fixing yourself at all. And honestly, if you're following a wellness person, a coach, and they're saying that, I'm like, run for the hills because you can do all the damn healing you want. But until you're realizing you've just been surviving in this structure that rewards your silence, you're basically stood in one of those revolving doors going around and around and around and around because you're not finding the base of it. You're just trying to fix something. So to me at least,
Hmm.
you really got to stop and observe. And I do want to cheat here and add like a little appendix that
Sure.
like I would say and challenge people. What's normal isn't what your community is calling normal or what we're spoon fed to believe is what we need. Because a lot of the time that's built off of all these systems, all these moments, all these happenings in life that have led us to feeling incorrect or false. So while you may think, you know what,
Mm.
my community does feel like that going out and partying is normal. So I love that. It's like, but if you ask half of them, they don't think it's normal. They
Right.
don't. Like your community thinking something is normal is not what is normal. So take that time, take that moment to yourself and reflect.
Self-reflect, think about what's normal for you for
Mm-hmm.
this, right? So let's talk about um, the book. If this book is a warning, what is it warning us about? And if it's an invitation, what are we being invited to do differently?
I think if it was a warning, it would be you could be chosen, successful, loved, ripped for the gods, so to speak, and still completely vanish. So if you spend your whole life performing the version of you that hurts the least, one day you are going to wake up and realize you're gone. You don't you don't know who you are, like my example before. And I think if it was an invitation, it would be to ask you to come back to that part of you that you were way back before your performance started. Like, what is that part of you that never stopped hoping someone would see you and want you to stay? And like, don't apologize for wanting more than survival in this world.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So where can our listeners find your books, your writings, if they'd like to connect with you? What are some next steps people can take to yeah, to find all about you, the book and other things?
Well, I would say that if I have not scared everyone off completely, and if all of your listeners are suddenly not like, whomst was that wackadoodle that he just had on here spouting off?
No, never.
You could find me, of course, on LinkedIn under my name with me in the clouds as a picture, or on Blue Sky as Colin is writing. And then for the book, I would say, first of all, if I've sparked interest in the book, I would be like, what? Really? Phenomenal. And I'm like, okay. So if you're keen to read it or check it out, I am going to have the e version and paperback, which just as an FYI, I say this not out of bias to be like, isn't it more money? But because I had the best creative collaborator, Brian Futter, who lives in Toronto, and he did all my amazing artwork and my formatting and really elevating it to like the next artistic level that I wanted it to be, and to be
Amazing.
able to get the actual like book and see it in color and have it and hold it in your hands is special. So, anyways, you will be able to get either of those through links on my profile or through any online book retailer, as it will be print on demand, and it's going to be released after February 18th.
And the name of the book again?
Blue Hour Gospel.
Blue Hour Gospel. All right. Well, I encourage everyone to go out and get that book. I know I'm going to be looking for my copy as well. So, Colin, thank you so much for being on this podcast today. It really invigorated me to think some of the things I even myself been going through personally as it relates to these topics. But thank you so much for naming what so many queer people are taught to carry quietly, that cost of being palatable, polished, and successful. You've really turned up the notch or turned up the volume to really be thinking about those things differently. And I really thank you for being a part of the podcast.
Well, a huge, 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 I can't even say how huge, a huge thank you from me to you for even giving me the opportunity to come and share some silly little thoughts that I had in my head that blossomed into something more. I appreciate everything you do for us in the community and getting voices out.
Absolutely. And we will look to maybe have you back as part two once the book is out.
Oh,
That could be fun too.
part two, local author flops. No, just kidding.
No, no, no,
I take
no.
it back. I take it back. I take it back.
Not at all. So again, thank you so much. I really appreciate having you on.
Thank
To
you.
all our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, subscribe to the podcast at coffeewithconvery.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram, where we share more behind the scenes clips, stories, and other things to stir both your head and your heart. This is Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.